Hi, I just want to pop on really quick and say I kind of have this feeling that you're in this place of unexpected magic right now, and also things are working out like so much better than what you can see right now. There's this element of surprise, and there's this element of like a hidden path is going to be revealed to you. Like hidden people are going to be revealed to you, something like that. And I also was just hearing the song, if ever, whoever there was, the Wizard of Oz is one because. Um, and for some reason, I'm just getting this feeling like it's the feeling of magic, and it's the feeling of things not being as they seem or appear, and it's also the feeling of, oh, this is so complex. It's like just because, like, it's like magic doesn't stop being magic just because you find out how it works, something like that. And there's actually a few echoes here which are kind of reminding me of the message that I filmed yesterday, all about like teachers and stuff like that. But I won't go into that too much right now because that just feels way too complex for what I really want to get into. But there's something about how you and your perception of the world has more of a power than what you think it does, and carries more infinite magic in it than what you think. And there's this sort of switch on like gullibility or naivety almost, where it's almost like a protection mechanism rather than a weakness. Something to do with like having the last laugh, or like having it be where, like, in the past there was this dynamic of sort of power and power over, where people, like in the Wizard of Oz, you know, like there would be this sort of deception and this power, and like the person at the top of the pyramid with the pointy hat with the stick and like pointing and telling people how to behave, how to show up in the world, what to believe, etc. And I feel like there's been this sort of switch, or perhaps it was just always there, I don't know, but it kind of feels like instead of being somebody who's super gullible and somebody who like sort of drank the Kool-Aid or like bought into the ideologies of someone who did not have your best interests at heart, but just was more interested in maintaining their own kind of power structure and their own selfishness, you know, it kind of like wasn't in the public interest, or it wasn't in the greater good, even though they may have, like, that might have been their messaging and their story, and like, oh, this is how you get enlightened, ABC, and like do this, and like this is the technique that you use, and like blah blah blah. And then there's sort of like arises around that personality, like the cult of the personality, where people are like only able to understand the world through the language that this one specific person uses. For example, you'll see that a lot in like the Abraham Hicks community of manifesting, where like people will go to the seminars and they're like, oh, I'm like trying to think of the language that they use, I don't know, but they're not even using their own language to describe their own experiences. They're using like the Abraham Hicks language to describe their own experiences, and in a way it's like they're subjugating their own experiences to the like approval, disapproval, acceptance, rejection of somebody else that they feel is in power, in a place of power that they don't have, or like understands something about the universe that they don't understand. Again, like that message that was coming through in the last one about the haves and the have-nots. And I'm like, I'm getting so like, this is such an uncomfortable message to give, because it has been the way of the world for so long. That is how the world has been structured for such a long time, that there was this illusion that there are certain people who understand, and then there's everybody else, you know, like there's like the kings and the peasants, you know. There's the people who have like the God-given right to rule, that kind of vibe, versus like you have the God-given right to be ruled, you know. And that's just a false setup that like humans have put into place in order to maintain their own like sense of power. You know, it's like coming from that sense of insecurity and that sense of hierarchy and that sense of like someone being innately better than someone else, which of course we know like that's just false, but it doesn't take away from the fact that that is how the world has been structured and is still structured to a large degree. Like, you can say that you believe that or you don't believe that, but at the same time there are still people who are in power and there are still people who are disempowered in this world. So it's just a very it's kind of like an uncomfortable message to give, because just because you can see power structures and see inequality in the world and kind of like take the blindfold off and kind of see how the magic works in a way, it still doesn't stop things being structured in that way. Like anyway, so like leaving that to the side for a second, just before we all get very depressed and very disempowered. Because that's not the point of this message. I don't actually, what is the point of this message, Alana? There's something awakening in like the recognition of who you are, of the power that you have. And I think there's something here about attention and intention as well, very strongly. Like where your attention goes, energy flows, that kind of idea. And I was just watching the monks that had just finished their walk across America this morning, and they were doing their like culmination ceremony and like making their little speeches and stuff, and they were doing the meditation, which I had on in the background. I wasn't able to do the meditation because I was doing other things, but there was like people in my home, but I had it on in the background. And even just like having that touchstone of presence and peace shifted something in my reality as I was like sitting and eating my lunch and like chatting, you know what I mean? I still had this like this part of me that was tuned into that radio frequency. And this actually reminds me of a message that came through, like, I feel like a couple months ago actually, but I just haven't been able to like weave it into anything else. But there's this feeling of having this expansion that's slowly happening, and it's like you're being tuned into two different radio stations at once. Wow, this is actually quite a powerful one. Being tuned into two different radio stations at once. And I think this is sort of the idea that we can be in the world and not of it, something like that. Like we can still carry out our daily tasks, work in our job, you know, serve our family, all of that kind of thing, at the same time as we have this rich sort of spiritual understanding and awareness that is bleeding into everything that we do in our everyday life. And according to like me and the way that I live my life, this is very like, there is no kind of separation, and there's no such thing as like, this is a spiritual time and this is not a spiritual time, or this is a spiritual task and this is not a spiritual task. This is really nebulous. Let me try and like bring it into practical terms. It can be easy, especially when we're on a healing path, or we have spiritual practices, or we have devotional practices that we like to do, even if you're not spiritual or if you're not religious. If you have something like journaling, for example, or if you have something where you commune with yourself and your thoughts and you get that deep sense of self-reflection, self-introspection, and awareness of you and your inner world, I would count that along the spectrum of like a spiritual practice, or like that's like kind of prayer in a way, and like self-devotion, you know, and having that, carving that space out for yourself. And if you're a human being living in the world, like, not everybody has the luxury of spending all day long writing in their journal, connecting to themselves, being in flow, being like in commune with the spirit, like, but on the other hand, you can, because even if you're washing the dishes, you can still be using that task as a method for presence, as a method for awareness, as a prayer, as a devotion. even if you're being interrupted from your journaling practice by like your kids coming in and like demanding their breakfast. Like, what is more important in that moment? You know, your brain might try and tell you, this is my time for me, and like I need to do this for me, blah blah blah. But there is also like the responsibilities that come knocking on our door, and then to try and like put those responsibilities lower down on the rung or make them be something that takes us away from ourselves or out of our spiritual awareness, really we can actually use them to do the opposite, to go further, to go deeper into our spirituality or into our presence with ourself, or into like acceptance of the world and how it is. Like, we can use absolutely every single thing as devotion, as like what I've just been saying. Like, every single thing that you do can be a prayer, you know. Every single thought that you have can be you devoting your life to God, to spirit, to yourself, to the universe. And that might only, like, that's like for a person who has like quite a devotional personality, which I would say that I do, and a lot of people do, but some people do not also. So, you know, take it if it kind of resonates with you. But where was I going with that? It's kind of like reframing the idea of interruptions, reframing them as opportunities instead. And I think that's like quite a big secret that's like lying in plain sight, that brings a lot of inner peace when you can start to welcome every single event, every single like thing that comes to you in your life as an opportunity. Every single inconvenience becomes a blessing. Like, that's fucking profound. Sorry, pardon my language, but like, that is profound. If you can take things that you don't like and have gratitude for them and say thank you for them, it actually ends up transforming not only how you respond to them, right, but it also ends up transforming your whole relationship with life, because you're no longer flinching, you're no longer like trying to hold things at a certain distance away from you. You're no longer trying to like protect yourself all the time, because you understand that life has to come in, life has to flow through you, and that there is nothing that can come into your existence and reality that you can't alchemize, that you can't work with, that you can't use as an opportunity to be present in your life, to learn, to grow, to respond from a place of compassion and peace, and to even like further develop those qualities within yourself of wellness, of peace, of happiness, of joy, you know, of gratitude. And I just think that's so beautiful, that that willingness to be the magician, like the magician card from the tarot, like that willingness to be the alchemist in your own life, and that willingness to work with the ingredients that you have in your store cupboard. Even if you don't like parsnips, you're still going to use the parsnips to make something out of them and say thank you for having the parsnips, right? Like, to be able to say thank you no matter what comes into your life, that makes you absolutely powerful, you know. That makes you what's the word that I'm looking for, like unbreakable, you know. I know there's a word that I can't think of right now. Something, why can't I think of it? That's so funny. It's not going to come to me. If you know the word I'm thinking of, please put it in the comments below. Thank you, Cara. The car is trying to remind me, but I still don't know what it is. That's all right. Anyway, the world starts to become a little bit lighter when we view it this way, especially, like I said before, all of the things that are outside of us, we stop trying to control them. We stop trying to use like spiritual terms and spiritual language to try and enforce a sense of justice externally to us, or to try and like be like, oh well, karma's a bitch and like it's gonna come back around and bite you in the ass, and like having this sense of like retribution in your heart, which at the end of the day, like, that is a weight that you don't need to carry. And I do understand what I'm saying here. I'm not these things are human and they come upon us, okay? And we need to understand within ourselves how to alchemize retribution into forgiveness, how to melt revenge into peace, you know, how to soften the anger that we have towards ourselves, towards others. You know, like, I was really strongly reminded of this with those monks saying like hatred will never solve hatred. It's so true. And that is like, to me, even the softest form of hatred can still be a seed within you that burns, and it actually like does damage to you yourself internally. You know, like, it's like holding on to that hot poker, right? And sometimes we have to be willing to let the poker go. And like, that is a big learning and a big journey. And I don't say that lightly, because it does take a certain amount of perseverance and sort of spiritual alchemy and emotional maturity to be able to even conceive of seeing the world in this way. A lot of people will talk about the people who did me wrong, and like, they'll think, and like, moving away from like focusing on the people that did you wrong, like moving away, like taking your energy away from that, like disarming that kind of bomb within you that seeks for some sort of sense of justice in the world, or that seeks for some sort of like payback or retribution or revenge, like I said, like, or like that wishes harm on others because of how they have acted towards you, or because even might not even be personal, because there is a lot of injustice in the world and we see it being, you know, done to others who are powerless, and it awakens also a sense of sacred rage within us. So there is that sense of that anger and that rage that comes up as a like impetus to allow us to move in the world, to allow us to be fiercely compassionate in the world, that allows us to stand up for justice in the world. I'm not saying that we all need to like, you know, lie down and let, you know, like injustice and like, you know, wrongful power go on in the world, but I'm just saying that like within yourself, how are those dynamics playing out? Are you allowing your inner space to be peaceful? And if that anger and if that rage is arising, what are you doing with it? How are you using it as a force for good in the world? Or are you just allowing it to consume you and to be something that that like burns you internally, you know, that causes this sense of disquiet or disempowerment, or, you know, whatever the case may be. Yeah, and so that's what I want to say about that for right now. Because I'm like, it's one thing to be like, oh, just be peaceful. Like, these monks aren't peaceful because they're ignorant, you know, they're not peaceful because they are naive. They are peaceful because they have that fierce compassion within themselves. They see the power structures that are in place. They chose America as a place to walk across for a reason, okay? They see what goes on in that country. They see how certain things are structured and how certain events have occurred, blah, 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 blah. It's not because they're naive. That's not where the peace comes from. Peace doesn't come from turning a blind eye to injustice. And it's the same within our own lives. It's actually confronting those things and choosing to look at peace anyway, like knowing the things that have been done to you and choosing forgiveness anyway. That is the wisdom, that is the strength, and that is the alchemy that lifts the consciousness on the planet, so that going forward and in the future and for the generations that come after us, that they inherit a world that is more full of peace, that is more full of wisdom and understanding. This got so deep so fast, but I don't really know like where this is going, but like there's a sense of peace that is rising, And I really, really pray that we all are able to access that even a little bit more, like 1 inch more every single day. Blossom a little bit more of that peace, that joy, that wellness within ourselves, and that we choose that path to help the whole planet to rise, that we choose the path of love, that we choose the path of forgiveness, and that we choose that path of fierce compassion. May you be well. May you receive blessings on your journey. Like I said, there is this hidden path becoming revealed. And I'm just going to leave the message there, okay? Thank you so much for spending time with me today. I would love for you to share any thoughts or reflections that you have down in the comments below. And yeah, many, many blessings for you. I will see you so shortly in our next message together. Bye.